Hello, hello, hello. I am so beyond excited for this week's episode because it truly speaks to me. First, I wanted to touch upon how I got to this idea because every single week I come up with a topic that is based on my own experience, and then I think I want to know more about this, and then I do a lot of research, and then I put it in a podcast episode, and that's basically what this podcast is, which is so exciting. But so this week is about listening to your guts and listening to your intuition. So how I got into that was basically, you might know, but for this podcast, I have an Instagram and a TikTok account as well to kind of market it, I guess. The thing is, before this podcast, I had deleted all of my social media. I only had WhatsApp and LinkedIn. Like, that was it. And I didn't miss it at all. It just didn't speak to me. And then I was like, well, yeah, I kind of need to get the podcast out there. Like, I'm not looking to go viral, but, even though I'm doing this for myself, it's nice to have some people that would like to listen and to be able to reach them. And so I kind of fell into the trap, so to say, of trying and create reels and posts and slides and whatever. And I hated every second of it. And I know that feels so bad to say, even though it was about a topic that I really loved, because every single episode I've made so far, I've just been so passionate about talking about it. Every single episode, I think, oh my God, this is so much better than the last one. And I think that's such a good sign. But I'm someone, I always want to strive forward. So then creating the reels based on what I already said, I'm just not interested anymore. I just want to get to the next thing. And so I have not posted a reel in a while just because I could not motivate myself for it. And that was kind of a sign that it was not meant for me. I truly think that I'm a long form person. I love watching documentaries. I love reading books instead of small little quotes or whatever. I love podcasts and YouTube videos, and Reels and TikToks, they, especially after deleting them for a couple of months, even though I have them back now, sometimes I do scroll, but they don't have me in that grasp that they did before. So I'm truly a long form girly, and so I think that I should stick to that. I do still have the TikTok and the Instagram, but right now I'm just doing carousel posts of either my life. So right now I have one of a beautiful hike I went on with beautiful blossoming trees, and yeah, it was amazing. And then I have a slide I'm going to make one for every episode. Obviously, I started with my first episode that just has the chapters so you can kind of see what it's about, and then just the link so people can listen. So, if I would think about it logically, and that's what I did in the beginning, I was like, okay, I need to make reels because, they're pushing reels, they get so much more views. First, I only had Instagram, but I was like, yeah, but TikTok reaches so many more people, so I got to get TikTok, and it all went against myself. And so that's kind of what inspired this episode. I did a little bit of a change. And even though it might not be optimal, and even though I might reach less people, in the end, it's about finding people who want to listen and who are interested. And it might take a little bit longer for them to find me, but once they do find me, I hope they stay, Yeah, that was what I went through and how I came up with this idea. So I think, especially in today's age, we have a lot of overthinking and underfeeling. So overthinking, basically using our logic and trying to find the logic about things instead of just feeling. And that way we can make wrong decisions or decisions that don't feel right, and in the end bring us to a place or even a life that doesn't sit right with us. And in the end, I know it's cringe, but we only have one life, we need to do something with it. And so I'm a very logical person. I love data and I love optimization. I recently actually got a smartwatch to track my sleep and my heart rate and stuff like that because I love optimization and I love data and I love logic. But I think putting too much pressure on that, I'm not saying we should ignore this stuff and only go with what we feel, but we often put way too much on that, and then we kind of mistrust our inner voice, and we tell that inner voice no, and that comes from a place of logic, but it can end up hurting us. To bring this a little bit into a historical perspective, you might think, where is this coming from? I'm the daughter of 2 historians, okay, it's in my blood. You've probably, hopefully, heard of the Enlightenment. And that was basically a whole philosophical movement. And of course, this is not an episode about the Enlightenment, but I wanted to touch upon it because one of these philosophers, called Descartes, he said, "I think, therefore I am." You might have already heard this quote and you might have thought, yeah, okay, that's great, I guess. Basically, he says that we are human, and we are because we are able to think. You know, if you look at a goldfish, not that much going on in their brain probably. They are not facing a midlife crisis, you know? But we are. We have a lot of thoughts and a lot of logic in our head, and, you know, that's part of being human, and we can definitely utilize that. But I think in today's age, we tend to get that out of balance and actually let that overtake what our body tells us and what our gut and our intuition tells us. But even before the Enlightenment, you know, there were a lot of philosophers and even mystics and sages that revered intuition as a sacred guide. For example, Plato, who, again, hopefully you've heard of, he really preached on intuition, and he called it a glimpse of true forms. So basically, what he means is that with our intuition, we can see the true reality, and we can see the true forms of people and things and situations, while trying to think and especially overthink about it can distance us and can kind of make us blind for a lot of the things. And then we've talked about him in, I think, probably almost every episode, but Carl Jung, here he is again. He saw intuition as a primary function of personality. He says that intuition gives outlook and insight. So again, even in philosophy and psychology, there is a lot of stress on intuition, and we'll get into even more of the little sciencey facts that I love to base my conversations upon. But when we shift actually into neuroscience, which, you know, I think neuroscience is so interesting. You know, there are so many studies on this, and, you know, there are a lot of studies actually that show that gut decisions often outperform analytical ones in complex, emotionally nuanced situations. So when we actually listen to our intuition and to our gut, we can make better decisions than analytical ones, which, I mean, that's kind of interesting, I think, because a lot of people, you know, you hear it all the time, make a pros and cons list, do this, do that, to kind of get it clearer. But another way to make a situation clear to you is to go inside instead of outside. And so that's kind of what this episode is about. And when we even look at, you know, the gut, what people are saying, listen to the gut. You might think, okay, yeah, that's just a saying. But in your gut, there is the enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system that is in your gut. And a lot of people call this your second brain. Why? Because it actually has over 100 million neurons. It literally thinks, which, I mean, I read this, my mind was blown. I don't know how you're doing right now, but for me, this was crazy. So yeah, our gut can literally think. It is our second brain. And so we should listen to it and we should utilize it. And then the last thing of this little intro is a guy, again, I say this in every episode, if I butcher names, I'm sorry, I'm trying my best. I'm just not good at it. A guy named Antonio Damasio. Yeah, something like that. Anyways, he is a neuroscientist as well, and he found that patients with brain damage, that's the group he was studying, people with brain damage, especially those with brain damage that affected their emotional centers, they couldn't make simple decisions, even with perfect logic. So they went through something, got brain damage on some kind of emotional center. Their emotions are all mixed up or they can't feel anything at all. And they couldn't make a simple decision, even when the logic was laid out for them perfectly. That shows how important our emotions is, how important it is to go inside and to feel. And I keep stressing this. We are so outside. We are so outside. I can't explain it better than that, but I will try. We are so constantly busy with other people and situations and all of this stuff, and we forget that there is a whole world inside of us too. And I think that is a world definitely worth exploring. So yeah, that was a little intro. I hope you're excited. I know I am. So let's get into this episode. I have noticed that all of my episodes tend to get longer and longer, so let me know what kind of format you prefer, because for me, I just kind of yap and I edit it and then I see how long it is. I'm not going for a certain time limit. I know some people really like the 20 to 40 minute mark. I know my last episode was something in the 50 minutes, I think 53 or something. So it was a little bit longer, but yeah, again, it's whatever you guys prefer, because obviously I'm quite a new podcast. I'm still trying some things out. So definitely let me know over on Instagram or TikTok. You can just shoot me a message so I can see, so I can get some feedback and make this better. And yeah, let's get into it. Anyways, this intro is already way too long. Okay, the first chapter we're going to get into is what is intuition and what it's not. Because I think it's just important to know what we're even talking about. And then after we'll get into some more specific situations that I think could be so useful. But yeah, this first thing is what is intuition and what it's not. So intuition is not blind guessing, obviously. Intuition is your body or your spirit even that is moving you in such a way that you can't explain, you just know. And that sounds really vague. What it actually is in reality, it's not your spirit moving, is actually pattern recognition. And that pattern recognition we can get from a few different ways, from our lived experience, from our subconscious processing, and our sensory data. So basically, when we have a certain intuition or whatever it may be, we are actually recognizing something that has happened before. And we might not realize this, and it might not be our own experience. It might even be an experience of something else, and subconsciously we recognize that same pattern. And intuition, by the way, is not only saying, oh no, don't do that, that's bad, it doesn't feel right. It can also be, this feels so good, this is totally aligned with who we are, and all that good stuff. So it can go both ways. But so it's that pattern recognition actually. And psychologists call it implicit learning. So basically we absorb rules of the world without consciously realizing it. Very often you're not living through something and I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna remember this. Next time I see something like this, I'm gonna know. No, often that's not what happens. Most of it is subconscious. So think of it as like kind of a quiet whisper, and we often drown it out or gets drowned out because of societal noise, and especially the word should. Like, you should do this, I should do this, this should feel like this should go like this, whatever. The word should is such a it drowns a lot of that intuition out, because we are thinking we should do something and we should be a certain way, and well, actually our intuition. And we often think we should do this, we should be this certain way. Well, actually our intuition is telling you that this does not align with who you are. And so we got to be careful with these shoulds and these expectations from society, or even from our parents or ourselves. In the end, what at least I seek from life is to be aligned with myself. You know, from the inside, the outside, spirit, mind, body, whatever, that it all just works harmoniously is kind of my goal. And that is what this podcast is about too. I think, by the way, small little intermezzo, I think in the future I will make some more episodes about more of the physical aspect, because I have not yet, while I'm actually really, really interested in it. And it takes up a lot of my life. You know, I've been going to the gym for like 3 or 4 years, something like that. I recently changed up my kind of workout schedule. And yeah, I'm so passionate about fitness and food and stuff like that I definitely do want to make an episode about that. But yeah, that was our little first chapter about what intuition exactly entails. And now we're going to talk actually about a little bit of that physical aspect, and that is hunger cues and the overruling of our body. So yeah, if you are struggling with some kind of food disorder, or try and know yourself, try and feel if you want to listen to this part of the episode. If not, I completely understand. There are always chapters in the description, so you should be able to skip through this part. But I just think this is so interesting, and especially because I'm very interested in food and working out and whatnot, that it's very, very interesting to me to do this intuitively, because we've definitely seen a trend of intuitive eating. And so I think that it is important to talk about. So yeah, let's get into it. All right, so hunger cues and the overruling of the body. What I started this episode with saying was that we've become very data driven. Especially you can see it when you go into that fitness community, you know, calories, your macros, tracking your steps, that we often put that above what our body tells us. An example that I want to give here is actually one I've struggled with for a while, and I've realized only recently, which is so nice. So I'm on a cut right now, so I'm trying to lean out a little bit, especially, as I said, I've been going to the gym for like 3 or 4 years, so I do have some muscle, and yeah, I just want to shred a little bit of that fat on top of it. Whatever your fitness goals may be, doesn't matter. It's still important to listen to your body. So, of course, I approached it in this kind of bodybuilder style way, which is also the way I had been training before I changed my workout schedule quite recently. But so yeah, I was like, okay, you know, you download MyFitnessPal and you start tracking your calories and tracking your macros. And for me, it wasn't restrictive in a way, but, you know, there were days where I could have eaten less, honestly. But there were also days where I needed that extra fuel. But no, I always had to stick to that. So, for example, I had my calorie goal was about 1,600, because my maintenance is about 1,800, 1,900. And yeah, most of the time I don't feel very hungry on a 1,600 deficit. So that was fine. But, you know, I do know that sometimes I was eating and, you know, I was getting in my protein, my fiber, everything. And it was not very high in calories, but I just wasn't hungry. I was just like, yeah, I need to eat this, because I planned out my day and my food to, you know, get my macros and get my calories. And even though I wasn't hungry, I still ate it. And then there were other days where I was hungrier, because maybe I had a more of a hefty workout, or I was in a different part of my cycle, which is another episode on its own. But yeah, then I would say no. I mean, we got 1600. We can't do anything more. And in the end, it's not, per day that it's important to look at. We are not going 1600 every day. We are trying to do 1600s in the weeks, in the months, in the probably not years. You shouldn't be in a deficit for a year, but that's what I'm trying to get across. When I try and eat intuitively, often I see that I can actually eat less food. Now you might think, okay, well, how are you going to do your workouts if you eat much less? That is where the logic comes in. I told you, don't only eat with your, or just don't only think with your intuition. The logic is still part of being human and it's still important. So before I go to the gym, especially most of the time, I go to the gym in the morning, which means that I've only had a little bit to eat because I'm not very hungry in the mornings. I do say to myself, okay, I'm just going to have like a small snack with a lot of carbs to have enough energy to actually perform well in the gym, because that's another big part of, training in general, whether it be a calorie deficit or not. It's important that you can actually perform and train intensively in the gym. And of course, if you have no food in your system, no calories, that's just not going to be it. So basically, little conclusion, I don't track anymore. I do think tracking can be very beneficial, especially if you've never tracked before and if you don't have a bad relationship with food. Because especially as a newbie, I remembered when I first tracked, I was just surprised that certain things had a lot of protein, certain things were high in fat, certain things were high in carbs. And now I kind of know if I still, balance my plates, again, with logic. I make sure that I have a good protein source. I make sure I have my veggies and whatever. So it's not that logic is totally out of the question. It's also what I'm trying to preface. But even if it is a super healthy meal with lots of protein, vitamins, whatever, and I'm eating it, and I just feel that, I'm full, I'm done, I don't really need anything more. I mean, I just put it in the fridge and it's for later, which was such a revelation, even though it sounds so simple. I think a lot of people were raised with, finish your plate. And so for me, it's very hard to not finish my plate just purely out of habit. But in the end, like, what's the harm? If you can finish it, you can finish it. And you don't have to, just put it in the fridge for later. And, you might even save money because you have to buy less food. So anyways, that was a whole little rant because that's what I've been going through right now. And that's also what kind of inspired this episode, apart from the social media stuff. To get back to the core of this episode, or this part, is when we actually look at studies. For example, this study is from the Journal of Nutrition Education. It was published in 2013. This study actually saw that people who tracked calories often developed disordered eating patterns and detached from hunger cues. Hunger cues are obviously just our body telling us we need food. And same thing with fullness cues. They're so important. They're literally your body just telling you like what it needs. When you track calories, you kind of detach from those cues and you try to eat purely based on reason and based on the numbers. When I was bulking, so I was trying to grow muscle and I ate a bit more than my maintenance, I was just mindlessly stuffing my food in my face because I had to get the calories in to reach my goal. And obviously it depends on your situation. If you're a professional bodybuilder, you do, need to do stuff like that. I wasn't. I was just trying to grow a little bit more muscle. And when I stopped my bulk and I stopped stuffing myself with food, I could not feel my hunger and I could not feel when I'm full. Everything was just quiet because I've drowned it out for months and months and months. Even though I reached my goal and I built some more muscle, at what price? I could not feel anything anymore. And so that's what I've been doing for the past couple of months, is trying to get those hunger and those fullness cues back. What I like to do is mindful eating. Always when I eat, I put on a show or a podcast or something, because when I live alone, it's just quiet otherwise. And now I am introducing that kind of back again, because it's just nice to learn something new while you're eating, But in the beginning, I would just turn everything off and just sit there and eat mindfully. I ate slower. One trick that I did to actually, and again, this is not necessarily in terms of like I wanted to lose weight, so I did this. This was just trying to get those hunger cues and those fullness cues back and trying to reconnect with what my body tells me that it needs. So one thing I did was, obviously you have your fork in one hand, you have your knife in the other. And so what I used to do was, you get a bite, you eat the bite, and while you're chewing, you already get the next bite ready to go. And this way you're eating way faster, and your fullness cues actually come after when you're already full, if that makes sense, because it's not as fast as you're getting that food into your mouth. So what I do is I, get my bite, whatever, and I put down my cutlery, and I chew, I swallow, and then I pick it back up to get my next bite. I've always been a really fast eater. I was always done before everyone else, my family, my friends, whatever. And so this is a really great way for me to also just enjoy my food, because sometimes it's just you start and all of a sudden it's gone and you're just like, where did that go? My recording broke off. I don't know how long I talked. I'm going to try and say what I just said, and I hope that, I won't miss anything. Basically, we were just talking about eating slower and mindful eating, and I tied this to longevity. Actually, when we see that people act in a calorie restrictive way, they tend to actually live longer. And I'm, again, not saying this as like track your calories and go into a really big deficit and whatever. It's more so portion size control. One quote-unquote revelation, for me at least, was that you can always get more. You can always get more. Like, how difficult is that? Not at all is the answer. Basically, what I would always do is eat with my eyes. I was hungry, I would get a lot on a plate, and I would eat it all. I would, out of habit, finish my plate, and then I'd be stuffed. While now I just get a smaller portion, and, if I finish that portion and I'm still hungry, I can get more. It's no problem. I can just get more. Like, it's so... it took me so long to realize this, honestly. And it has done me so much good. But yeah, one thing people often think is like, okay, am I hungry? Am I hungry? Yes, I'm hungry. And they think they're actually hungry. But what they actually are is bored or anxious or stressed. And yeah, how to kind of distinguish that, because often when this comes out of feelings, so often that is a craving more so than actual hunger. And so it can be difficult to kind of separate the two. So for example, if my body's telling me, okay, I want a donut. Okay, this can be two things. Either I'm hungry and my body is looking for some carbs, some fats, some quick calories because it's hungry and it needs food, or it's a craving and it just wants some sugary goodness. And so how do we distinguish these two? I'm going to give you a little trick that I often do, and it tends to work really well for me. Basically what I did, or what I always do if I get a quote-unquote craving, to find out if it's hunger or if it's really craving, is I try to imagine myself eating different foods. So, okay, I want the donut, and then I think, okay, some pizza. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, some salmon and asparagus. Yeah, that sounds good. Some scrambled eggs with tofu. Yeah, that sounds good. So every single time I try and get a little bit further from the original craving, so from the donut. I might start with, okay, some fruit, to still get that sugary and that sweet, and then I might go into some other stuff. And if I'm saying yes to most of these things, it means, yeah, my body is hungry and it wants some calories, and just everything, But if I'm saying, no, I don't really want an apple right now, I really want a donut, then it's a craving. That's what I do personally. But yeah, so it's important to listen to your body. It's kind of that balance between intuitive and, logical thinking. So yeah, I just thought that this was a really interesting topic, because it's something that I've recently kind of been way better at, and trying to get my hunger cues and my fullness cues back, especially after months of bulking and just, stuffing my face and trying to get in those calories and that protein. When I stopped that, I just, no hunger, no fullness. It was just silent, because I've drowned it out for so long. So I'm so grateful to, be on my path and try to actually listen to that. So yeah, that was this little section. But of course, intuitive thinking can still be applied to so many other different aspects of our lives. For example, this next part is going to be about people who feel wrong, but everything looks right on paper. You just kind of have this feeling of like, I don't trust this. So this next section, as I said, is about people and relationships and friendships and whatever. If after this section you feel like you want to know more, my last episode is actually all about relationships and people and everything like that. So you can give that a listen after this episode. But yeah, let's get into people who feel wrong even though they look right on paper. Okay, people who feel wrong even though they look right on paper. As I said, last week's episode was all about this, so I'm excited because, I really like this topic, obviously. There are people that we don't align with. We are misaligned energetically, but you can't logically find anything. You can't put it into words, and so you rationalize their present. And, they check all the boxes, but something feels off, but you can't put your finger on it, so they're still around, and they still influence you, as we saw again in last week's episode. I'm not going to keep referring to it. I'm going to try my best. Yeah, I'm not a very self-promo kind of girl, but, anyways, what was I talking about? Feeling energetically misaligned, but you rationalize their presence. So something very important, and I've been talking about it not only here, but in the whole episode actually, is somatic intuition. Your body often knows before your mind does. Think about having butterflies, or a tightness in your chest, or a dry mouth. These are all signs that your nervous system is signaling something deeper. And even though you might not be able to rationalize this feeling, you might be like, oh my God, why am I stressed around this person? Or why is my heart rate going up? Or why am I getting butterflies? Or anything like that. It is a sign from your body, and you shouldn't ignore it, even though you can't find a reason behind it, or because you can't find the logic behind it. And I think that's so important. People really ignore that part, and it breaks my heart, because it's your body literally trying to scream at you like, hello, this is what's really going on, listen to me, please. And yeah, people are just not listening. So yeah, that is kind of heartbreaking if I put it like that. But yeah, if we go into psychology, actually, there's this psychologist, Dr. Stephen Porges. I don't exactly know how to pronounce it yet again. And he came up with what is called the polyvagal theory. So yeah, basically what he says is that our nervous system is constantly scanning for safety. So if someone makes your body feel unsafe, even if subtly, it will let you know. It will raise your heartbeat, it will get you into some kind of stress moments, even if it's subtle. It's important to listen because it's your nervous system feeling unsafe. And again, you might not see that and you might not logically think that you are unsafe, but there is something energetically misaligned with this other person or the situation or whatever it may be. It's important to listen to that nervous system. And so when I wanted to say in my last episode, I said I wasn't going to talk about it anymore, but when we are evaluating our relationships, seeing if they truly align with us, one of the things you can look at is how your body feels after spending time with someone. Do you feel a tenseness in your shoulders and in your back? And do you feel kind of, ready to sprint away, so to say? Do you feel tensed up, or do you feel relaxed and happy and at peace? So different. And even though you might have the exact same conversation with someone or do the exact same activity with two different people, one might leave you feeling one way and one might feel you leaving the other. And it's just important to listen to your body and to feel and to turn inside and not only emotionally, but again, as I said, also just how your body feels. Do you feel stressed? Do you feel tense? Or do you feel at peace and relaxed? So yeah, this part was a little bit shorter. Again, because my last episode was about it. Oh my god, I need to stop saying that. I hate when people constantly say to listen to other episodes. But yeah, next part is how we've been trained to mistrust ourselves. So as I said, okay, yeah, in today's world, we are very focused on data and numbers and whatever. But there are actually other ways that we have been trained to mistrust ourselves. To go back to our last topic about eating, I've been raised, and a lot of people have been raised to finish their plate. And so that's a way that is just ingrained in our system and can actually lead to maybe different results than we want. So this section was just really interesting because I kind of got to take a look at what is around us and what is influencing us in a certain way and how can we step away from it and turn inside. So yeah, I thought this was so interesting, and I know I say that every episode and every single part. I'm like, oh, this part is so interesting, because it really truly is, okay? So yeah, let's get into it. How we've been trained to mistrust ourselves. So when we look at the education system, I know, I'm taking this in a whole different direction. When we look at school, we are often taught to memorize certain things and to mimic certain things and not to feel and not to think freely. And so when we see something, again, going back to we should do something, we should feel a certain way, we should be a certain way. We are programmed by school to take something and to mimic it and to replicate it and to memorize it and not to feel if this is actually aligned with us. You can even take this to social media. Social media implicitly teaches us to constantly compare ourselves and to not sense. So, for example, when I was still on social media, I would see these people do a lot of different things, right? For example, when we go back to that fitness space, I obviously saw a lot of fitness reels and workout stuff. And for example, they said like, oh, you need to be doing this exercise. And they showed a certain exercise in the gym. And then I immediately thought, oh my God, yeah, I need to be doing that. Like, I'm not training as good as them because I'm not doing this exercise. And I've never done that exercise. Sorry, excuse me. One reel, really? Okay, maybe I've blown that a bit out of proportion, but our mind just immediately connects that memorize and copy thing. and we don't think, okay, maybe this is not for us. Like, even when you get a random TikTok, like, for example, I have, not that I can remember, ever did something along the lines of pottery. But then you get one of those pottery videos on that spinning plate, and you're just like, oh my god, pottery is so cool. I need to do a pottery class. And no, you don't. No one is telling you should. Like, okay, if you feel that it really aligns with you, do it. Have fun, be creative. But it's not because someone is doing something or someone is looking a certain way or whatever that you have to do that too, especially if it's not aligned with you. And again, based on what we see in society, on social media or in real life, we see something and we think copy and implement. While actually it should be a 3-step process. We should see something, we should check. Is this for us? Is this aligned with who we want to be, who we are, etc.? And then, implement it if it is. So it's important to be more mindful and to not let everything go fast in your brain, but to really think and to take that a little bit slower. And so that's actually what the first episode of this podcast was all about, is to take the pause. And then the last example I wanted to give was productivity culture and hustle culture and all of that stuff. And they basically tell us to override rest. They're like, in your 20s, you should be working day and night and making all of this money and doing all of these side income streams and whatever. And yeah, sure, go out, make some money and, do some side income streams. That's really great. But don't tell me not to sleep. Are you crazy? Don't put your health second. I think it is all about balance and all about alignment and harmony. And I cannot stress this enough. Please listen to your body, because your body will tell you, hello, we've been awake for 48 hours. Let's sleep, and then you shouldn't let it sleep for only 4 hours, even, especially if you're drowning that part of yourself out, it's easy not to get any bodily signals or just to not hear them because you're drowning them out constantly. But then when you actually do give yourself that sleep or that good nutrition that, your body really needs, you see such a change in your energy level and your mood and whatever, that you're just like, wow, I should have done this before. And your body's just like, yeah, I've been telling you this whole time, man. Just start listening. The result of all of this stuff about school and social media and this copy-paste and this productivity culture, the result is just the generation right now that lives in their head and forgets to inhabit their body. And they're just so misaligned and so detached that they can't see anything else. They can't hear their body because they've drowned it out for years because they feel like they need to be a certain way because that is what they see and that is what they think is expected of them. So when we actually look at feminine energy in both men and women, might I add, is about feeling and receiving and sensing, basically using intuition as your compass for life. It's important to utilize this feminine energy, again, in men and in women, utilizing that and not only relying on your logic. And relearning intuition takes a long time and it's hard and everything like that, but it means basically learning to get quiet so you can actually hear it. For example, let's go back to the example of someone who just doesn't feel right but you don't know. Sit by yourself and think about it or journal about it or something like that, but just get into a quiet place to really try and feel and to really look inside. And I just think that's so important and so interesting. Then let's talk about how you can strengthen your intuition while still honoring your logic. So being in a balance of that logical and that intuitive thinking that we talked about, and I'm so excited. So let's get into the practical tools to strengthen your intuition. Strengthening your intuition while honoring your logic is not as hard as you think. So I wrote down a few bullet points of things you can implement in your life. Feel free to take as many as you want and implement them in your own life. You don't have to, but it is proven by science that implementation and action is actually the best way to learn. So you can listen to this podcast and nod along, but if you don't do anything with it, is it really improving your life? That's why I always have an action-based portion in my episodes, and this is it. So yeah, the first thing is a morning check-in. I really, really believe in starting your day the right way. I like to start my days early with a walk and a green tea, so I'm just set for the day and I feel like the person I want to be. And so one thing I do on this walk is it can literally just be 1 minute, but just think, what do I need today? Like, what do I feel? So for example, when I was in my exam period, I noticed that, of course, I wasn't seeing as many people. I wasn't being as social because everyone was studying. But I could feel that I kind of needed that connection. So what did I do? I went on a walk with my mom and I talked to her and I made some plans with friends for after the exams, or I even did a study session with a friend. Things like that. Like, you don't have to overthrow your life just because of what your body is telling you. You should still stick to your goals. Like, for example, the study session with a friend. You still want to give your body what it needs, but you also want to give your body what it needs. See? See that little nuance? Oh my God, I just came up with a quote. Basically, you want to give your body what it needs, what it's asking for, but you also need to give your body what it needs in terms of logical thinking, in terms of, I have exams, I need to study. Or I'm trying to lose weight, I need to go on a run, even if I don't feel like it. Second is the 3-second pause. Again, I have an whole episode about this. The 3-second pause. So before responding, ask yourself, how do I feel? What do I know? What's the situation? Everything like that. For example, if you get a text from a friend saying, hey, we're going out partying, you want to come with. Like, we're going out partying this Friday, you want to come with. And you think immediately, oh, okay, well, these are my friends, I should be a good friend and I should go with them. And you respond, yes, I would love to see you on Friday. What you could also do is take 3 seconds and think, do I want to party? I don't really like drinking anymore. It doesn't feel like me. It doesn't feel right. So maybe your message back could be, hey, I would love to go for a brunch or a lunch or for a gym session or whatever. I sadly won't be able to make it Friday. And that's it. That's it. 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Next is journaling. I said it before. Can be just like thinking in your head, or journaling, writing it down. Again, going into that quiet and just go by yourself and think about a certain situation, and not only thinking logically about like, okay, this happened and this happened and this happened, and I analyze that this way, so that means that they must feel this way, that means that they, did this, whatever. Also think, okay, well, how do I feel about this? How do I feel about this person, about this situation? What is my gut telling me? So yeah, again, kind of getting into that quiet. Next, body scans. Kind of ties into what I just said. Go over your body, especially if after something just happened or while you're with a certain person or whatever. See, okay, is there a lot of tension in my shoulders, in my back? Is my heart pounding? Am I having butterflies in my stomach? Am I really excited? You kind of also see and get to know yourself. And then if you do feel your heart racing, okay, I've had this before. I know what this is. So in the beginning, it might be like, okay, well, what is this feeling? What is this tension? Like, what does it mean? But again, in the end, you're going to strengthen that intuition because you know the patterns, and that pattern recognition is going to get stronger and better, etc., etc. Another tip is practice saying no without justifying. Let your no be enough. Sorry for all the door slamming. I'm at my family's house right now, trying to get through it. So yeah, practice saying no without justifying. Let your no be enough. So let's go back to that example from the friend wanting to go out partying this Friday. You don't have to say like, oh, well, I don't really want to drink and I don't like partying and I kind of want to go to bed early and making all, you can just say, no, thank you, but I'd love to go to brunch on Saturday. No, thank you, but, let's go for a run on Sunday morning. You don't always have to justify everything your intuition says as long as you know. I think that's a big thing. Like if you feel that something's off, for example, with a person, you don't want to be friends with them anymore, they often are still in that very logical thinking mindset. So they might ask you like, okay, well, why are you not seeing me anymore? Like what's going on? And you might say like, yeah, I don't know, it just feels off. And they're like, okay, yeah, but what did I do? You don't have a logical answer. And that's okay. You just listen to yourself, and that's okay. Let your actions and saying no, let that be enough. You don't always have to justify yourself. Justifying yourself and not always having to, often not having to, I think is a whole episode on itself. So I'll leave this bullet point where it is. But yeah, such a good one. And then the last one, I don't want to say it, I feel bad. But it is kind of inspired by one of my other episodes. I know I shouldn't say it. But it is time in nature and water. So again, I have a whole episode about water. Basically, I discussed it there also, that, being in nature and especially with water can really disconnect you from noise and reconnects you with your inner signals. Again, turning inside and thinking, what am I feeling? What's going on? Etc., etc., etc. So good. Anyways, those were my little practical tips. I want to connect our neuroscience, so things we saw, and connect that to spirituality and kind of like what we've seen, obviously, like that intuition. It all might sound a little bit iffy, like super spiritual and whatever, but there's actual science behind it. So let's get into it. I'm excited. Let's get into it. Neuroscience meets spirituality, the new way forward. Ooh. Okay. We've already talked about a lot of neuroscience on this podcast. It's just part of what we do. And that means that I've already read through a lot of studies on neuroscience. And a few of these studies actually are about intuitive people and how that exactly works. So there are quite a few studies that show that intuitive people have heightened insula activity. You might think, okay, well, what does that mean? Basically, your insula is a brain region for internal bodily awareness. So again, people that are highly intuitive make decisions based on intuition and that quote-unquote listen to their gut. They actually listen to their gut. They actually listen to their body because they are using their insula to listen to their body, to their internal bodily awareness. And that is just heightened and strengthened. We've talked a lot already about the prefrontal cortex in some past episodes. Basically, your prefrontal cortex is very logical based. And so we see when this insula and this prefrontal cortex are in balance, you can become such a powerful decision maker because you're both wise with your prefrontal cortex, but you're also instinctual with that insula. So you kind of want to go again for a balance with both. I've been trying to get that across this whole episode. It's so important to have that balance. And so we see that even come back in neuroscience. That was a little tiny section, if you will. But let's get into the conclusion because I feel like we've talked about a lot and it's important to get everything into a nice little conclusion that you can really take away with you and take with you through your day and your weeks and your months, whatever it may be. So yeah, let's get into it. Let intuition lead the way, but take logic with you. Basically, that's kind of the conclusion of this episode. You are not a machine, okay? You are not built to only live off of numbers and off of logic. And yeah, you're not a machine. You are a sensing, knowing, deeply connected being. And you've been living like a machine this whole time, I'm assuming. And if you can only quiet the noise long enough to hear yourself, it's such a shift. Logic keeps you safe, but intuition sets you free. Oof, that's another really good quote. Damn. Anyways, the goal is not to abandon one for the other, but to reclaim the forgotten intelligence of your gut, your body, your soul. So let your life become a balance, a dance between knowing and feeling, between calculation and trust. I really, really liked this episode. I hope you did too. If you did, make sure to leave a review if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, make sure to follow, make sure to do all the nice things. Obviously, I am a new podcast, so, feedback is always, always appreciated. If you have any specific topics you want to hear, shoot me a DM. I'd love to get back to you. If you think anyone is interested in one of my episodes, definitely send it over to them. It would help me a lot, and it might help them as well because they're, learning as well. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye.